Michaela gently placed her black witch's hat on top of her black curls as she looked at herself in the mirror. Her mom had painted her skin green and outlined her eyes in purple paint. She wore tall, black boots underneath a long, purple dress. It was October 31st, and she was ready for trick-or-treating on Halloween night. "Michaela," her mom called out from downstairs. Michaela's two friends, Colton and Porter, had arrived. Colton stood in the doorway, his costume blowing in the wind. A white sheet hung over his head, and his eyes peered out from two cutout holes. Porter decided to dress like his favorite superhero, Batman. A black mask covered his face and a long cape trailed behind him. They carried plastic pumpkin bowls to collect candy later in the evening. The two boys greeted Michaela with equal levels of excitement. "Hi, Michaela," Colton said. "You ready to go trick-or-treating?" Porter asked. She nodded her head and ran to grab her coat. "Let's go, everyone," her mom called out, and they all marched out the front door. All around them, children and parents walked from door to door in colorful costumes. Carved jack-o'-lanterns sat in front of houses, candles shimmering inside the orange pumpkins. A breeze blew past Michaela and her friends, making her shiver. The weather had just started to get colder. Michaela remembered her class earlier that day, when her teacher talked about the origins of Halloween. Mrs. Narula told Michaela and her classmates that the holiday started with an ancient festival called Samhain, 2,000 years ago in Ireland. The word Samhain means summer's end in Gaelic, a language spoken in Ireland and Scotland. Mrs. Narula looked at different documents from the American Folklife Center to find out about Halloween's history. She found that the festival celebrated the end of summer and the beginning of winter, a time to gather crops to prepare for the colder months. The Celtic people who celebrated this festival also believed it was the time when all the souls who had died that year traveled to the next world. To keep the dead spirits away, people lit bonfires. For ceremonies, some dressed in animal furs to disguise themselves so that the dead spirits would not be able to recognize them. Mrs. Narula said this is one reason why we might still dress up in costumes today. Later, the festival of Samhain was replaced with All Souls' Day, a Christian holiday that honored the dead. People celebrated with bonfires and parades. They also dressed up in costumes as saints, angels, and devils. Porter reached up and pressed the doorbell at the house across the street. Ding dong. A big, green Frankenstein pulled open the door, holding a big bowl of wrapped treats. Michaela and her friends gasped, and then laughed when they realized it was just Mr. Clock dressed up. "Trick or treat," the three sang with big smiles. As Mr. Clock sprinkled candy into their baskets, Michaela thought of Mrs. Narula again. In the 1800s, many people from Ireland and Scotland came to the United States to start a new life, the teacher told her students earlier that day. Even though their ancestors had their own trick-or-treating traditions, they started their own in their new country. Mrs. Narula had read an article by Benjamin Radford, a man who researches science and history. He wrote that teenagers in those communities started to play pranks during Halloween celebrations. Adults tried to stop the pranks by giving children candy instead. And the tradition still remains today with children all around the world dressing up for candy.